Everybody. So YouTube is telling me we are now live. For anybody who joins us on this exciting live stream today, if you can in the chat, just let us know how our volume is. We want to make sure that you guys can hear us and that you guys can hear the video that we're going to react to. So, for those of you joining in here in the next few minutes, welcome to Covenant Origins. I'm the host, Jacob Ryder. We got the boys back in town for this episode. It's been a hot minute since we did our last live stream. Um, quite frankly, we have way too many videos to react to. That this could be a full-time job. Sam, you've put together a pretty lengthy playlist, and it's ever growing. So we got a lot of good stuff here. Sam, Michael, how are you guys doing today?
Good.
Good. Yeah, I'm excited for this and obviously we picked this because it's just egregious how many misrepresentations and stuff. I'm not here to like poke fun at evangelicals, but really just to maybe commiserate and have a bit of fun understanding that the people who say they know a lot about us tend to not actually know very much at all. That's accurate.
Yeah, well, when we get to the video, we'll learn about who our main players are, and a little bit about their background as well. Um, Before we get into the video, I do have just one thing I want to mention up front, a little bit of housekeeping. So this next week on August 14th, which I believe is Thursday, Michael will be joining me as my co-host for a new show we're going to be doing that's called Extra Biblical. And this particular show is going to be digging into apocryphal texts, the pseudepigrapha, and a number of other early Jewish and Christian texts that are not canonical, but are nevertheless interesting, fun, funny, scary, and everything in between. So we're going to have a lot of fun with it. It's really just going to be Michael and I discussing some really cool things from all these various texts, and just having as much fun as we can along the way. He's going to be my apocryphal pal, so to speak. So looking forward to that. So mark your calendars. That is going to be August 14th. Is going to be our first episode, and I will make sure to post in the community tab on my channel here on YouTube any relevant information about that as well. And we already have our text picked out. So Michael will be kind of spearheading that discussion on Thursday, because this is something that he picked out and one that I'm all too willing to let him run with. So um, it's going to be a lot of fun, and we hope that you guys have fun in the chat as well in that. But anyways, we're not here to talk about that today. We're going to be responding to, reacting to, critiquing a video by a gentleman named Renton Rathbun. He has the Renton Rathbun Show on YouTube. About a month or two ago, roughly speaking, he had a guest on who is an expert on Mormonism. So we're going to see just how much he gets right, how much he gets wrong, and see if we can maybe have fun responding to some of the claims they make. How are you guys doing? You guys ready to go?
Yeah, I will. If this were, I'll just preface it this way. If it were a drinking game that we participated in with our Dr. Peppers or something, you'd be highly caffeinated by the end if you were to call out straw men and other fallacies that appear in this discussion. Look, I don't know. He doesn't have a lot of views on it, so that's the one positive thing. I don't know what kind of traction he's going to end up getting, but just be prepared. Like it was really hard for me, and I told this to Jacob and Sam to actually sit through this thing. I watched it in 5 minute spurts throughout the week. And it took all week. I finished last night. Uh, so.
Well, and Michael, you say, yeah, this particular podcast episode doesn't have a ton of views, but as I've tried to familiarize myself with the guest, which we'll get into,
Mhm.
it does seem like this is representative of the kind of authority and the story that he tells about Mormons and our theology.
Yeah, his so I don't know if we want to talk about his background as the expert or not first, Jacob, but I'm
Yeah,
good with that too.
he'll introduce himself a little bit, and then when he does, we can pause for a moment to give a
Sure.
little bit more, because I know I think all three of us have had to look him up because we are a little unfamiliar with him at first, and so yeah, we'll get there. Let me start the video. We'll get the ball rolling. And like you said, anybody in the chat watching this with us, let us know in the chat anytime you hear an error, a fallacy, uh, whatever kind it is. Let us know, and let us know your favorites too, because there's some pretty cool things being said in this discussion.
And as you pull it up, I love getting to do this series with you guys because we get to have fun, of course, but let this be also instructive. If there are some things that you didn't catch as we go along through reacting, make note of that and see there are little nuances, not to be nitpicky or pedantic, but there are subtle little things that people say and do to misrepresent our beliefs. So things like this are really instructive and fun.
Yeah. And for you guys, anytime you want to stop and chat about something, just let me know and I'll pause the video for us. All right, and here we go.
A grandparent, a mentor. This show is for you. We are interested in the next generation and how we can influence them and be a help to them and guide them. I believe sometimes we're living in Judges chapter 2, where a generation is rising up that does not know the Lord. And so my hope is that this podcast in some way can help us develop the tools we need to help the next generation be godly men and women. And so with that being said, we come to you unscripted, unedited, and raw. So be ready for a stimulating conversation with zero interruptions. Today, what we're going to talk about. Now, when I say this, please give us a second because you're going to think, oh, I may not be interested in this one. We're going to talk about Mormonism. But what I want you to understand is how much Mormonism has affected your life in your household already. Maybe
And
many
made it
of you already
better.
know that Glenn Beck is, Blaze Network and all the things that he does and works out. He is a self-proclaimed Mormon. We'll talk more about him and his particular way of thinking about Mormonism in a little while. But we also, you might have heard of Angel Studios and how they have brought about a lot of television that's very clean and that many of us have already watched and enjoyed, which is owned by a group of brothers who are Mormons. And up until recently, The Chosen, that TV show that probably many of us have seen, was also run through Angel Studios and was very influenced by the Mormons that owned it. You would notice that the first, I don't know how many seasons have gone by so far, but all the seasons up to, I should have looked this up. It's one of the seasons. You weren't allowed to say that Jesus was God. That was never allowed to be mentioned. I don't know how it's going now. I guess Dallas Jenkins.
I'd like to know the source on that one.
There isn't a source. There's just an assertion.
Who's out there on the set of The Chosen saying, okay, you guys know where your bread is buttered. You're not allowed to say Jesus is God. That's a big no-no.
Even though the title page of the Book of Mormon says Jesus is God.
Right. Yeah, this is going to be the fun part, I think, of this. If we treat this too seriously, I think this could be a pretty dour episode.
Yeah.
So if we try to have a little bit of fun with this, then I think that'll make it all the more enjoyable and tolerable in some places. But you're going to hear a lot of assertions made with source is trust me, bro. really doesn't go a whole lot beyond that. Yeah.
And there's
Anything else?
And there's no Socratic method used. Not that they should be doing it with each other, but there should be a way to incorporate it at least, right? To if this guy's a PhD in Mormon studies as he says he is, the guest that he hasn't even introduced yet,
Right.
then why doesn't Renton use that to try to get to more truth or catch the guy in something? Like I don't get it. He just buys everything hook, line, and sinker. Maybe, I guess if you want to believe something, you're just going to believe it. But
Well, he just said it a moment ago. I should have looked this up.
yeah, I should have actually known what I was talking about.
That should be I might retitle this video after it airs. I should have looked it up. Because that is the mantra of this episode. It's quite fascinating.
Right. And I'll say, like, do or don't like Glenn Beck, whatever. I think he's a wonderful, wonderful philanthropist who, just like every other human on earth, has good and bad political opinions. Great, whatever. All the other good fruits the guy's talking about, all this, like, these Mormons are influencing you. We need to watch out. Okay, so Angel Studios is good, wholesome Christian content. What are we afraid of? All these movies are awesome. Are we really upset that The Chosen has helped influence a whole generation of youth, not to join the LDS Church, but to just join church, to be active in faith? It's a weird thing to be against because a Mormon helped finance it.
Yeah.
One thing that I find interesting, having found this the podcast, is that it, in many ways, awoke me to the reality that, of course, there's going to be like different echo chambers in the kind of media that people choose to listen to. And so there are going to be plenty of, traditional, conservative, evangelical, like homeschool parent types that really are concerned about this. Like, they're concerned about the wokeness in public schools, and then in a conspiratorial way, it seems he's framing this, that like Mormons control the media kind of thing, which, yeah, not the best track record of having that kind of mentality, interacting with your fellow Americans.
Yeah, Mormons are the new Jews. It has that vibe from the 80s and 90s and stuff. Those conspiracy theories, and they're coming alive again because of Gaza. But yeah, it's this idea that these Zionists, and now it's that these Mormons are coming in and influencing you, and they're gonna brainwash, and it's
very reminiscent of some of those similar talking points and tactics and whatnot. It's again, as I mentioned, we're going to try and keep this light and fun, and poke holes in their errors. But at the same time, if you were to actually take this conversation quite seriously, as it seems the host and his guest will, this is like do or die. These are dire stakes. Our children's spiritual lives are at stake here. This is of utmost importance. And so what we're going to talk about today is of utmost importance. And so they're framing it that way. So I think at some level, we kind of have to take their concerns seriously. But some of the things that they are going to say are going to be very reminiscent of some of those talking points that we've heard throughout history that have been anti-Semitic and whatnot. And so, unfortunately, but we'll get there. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's just plow on through and get into this.
Can you bump up the playback speed a bit? Is that possible? Because there's a little bit of filler, like he said. It's unedited.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just using my media player here. Let's see.
Right.
It'll bump it up to 1.5. That might be a little too quick.
Let's see how that sounds.
Let's see how it is.
You want to do that?
It's just introing, and then if we need to, we bump it down.
All right, cool. Here we go.
have gotten more control of it, but for most of Chosen's existence, they were not allowed to even say that Jesus was God. So that's just a couple things. I want to bring in our little French connection over in the technical side of our studio, and ask you, Paul, are there any other connections of Mormonism to our daily lives?
Yeah, the one I was thinking about was a BYU TV, and they're very, very popular amongst Christian teens and children. I'm thinking particularly of Studio C, which is a show that I watched growing up, and it's very clean. I think Christians appreciate it because Mormons, in my opinion, tend to have a sense of modesty that's a little bit more controlled in the world, and the humor is always clean. But nonetheless, it is definitely what you would call a Mormon connection. Yeah.
Okay, so there's many more connections, and we'll talk about those in a minute. Today, our guest is a returning guest, but very apt to talk about what we're going to talk about today. His name is Dr. Travis Kearns. Is it Kearns? Kearns, plural. Okay, we don't want just one Kearns.
No, it's all good.
Okay, so Travis Kearns, and you have gotten your PhD in apologetics, but in your PhD work, you actually did your dissertation on Mormonism. Is that correct?
That's right, Mormon epistemology, so the Mormon understanding of how we know things.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so could you tell us a little bit about maybe some other groups? Do you know of any other groups that have impacted Christians that they may not even know is tied to Mormonism?
Nothing really. I think BYU TV is a big one. Obviously, as mentioned earlier, Studio C is significant. It's a very clean version, basically, of Saturday Night Live, or as a kid of the 80s, a clean version of In Living Color.
Okay.
Obviously, The Chosen is significant in contemporary days with an LDS influence. In fact, you mentioned Dallas Jenkins earlier. I did a podcast a number of months ago where Dallas Jenkins was on the previous week to talk about The Chosen and the connection to Mormonism. I was on the following week to respond because of the influence that's there. So I think those are significant. And then obviously the 100,000 plus missionaries that they have out all over the world, the vast majority of whom are 18 to 20 years old, walking through neighborhoods or on bicycles or wherever it may be, spreading the message of Mormonism. Really there was this Mormon moment mid-2010s. Mitt Romney running for the presidency in 2012. The Book of Mormon musical that hit Broadway was significant. The Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City in 2002 made a big splash. The Southern Baptist Convention met for its annual meeting in Salt Lake in 98. We meet there again in 2027. So there's really just this past 15 to 20, maybe 25 years, been a really significant kind of bullseye on Mormonism. And the church, when I say that, I mean the LDS Church, they've really tried to clean themselves up, so to speak, and look more Christian as they go. Yep.
So how big is this? I'm going to call it religion for now. We'll discuss what it is towards the end.
Yep.
But how big is this movement, the Mormon movement? Are we talking about a few million? I mean, how big is this?
Yeah, so the only way we can know numbers is to know the official numbers that are released by the LDS Church. Now, really quickly, we were talking about this before we started. There are hundreds of breakoff groups inside of Mormonism generally. Usually, it's not referred to as Mormonism, it's referred to as the Smith-Rigney movement because of Joseph Smith. And
Real quick, it says there's hundreds of splinter groups. Okay, just briefly, for those who don't know, okay, there's the whole umbrella of Mormonism. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is referred to as under the Brighamite branch, but then the Josephite branch, which was the restored or reorganized rather Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that was done by Joseph Smith III, Joseph's son. That's the one that has splintered hundreds of times. There have been fundamentalist sects that have broken off from the Brighamite church, but when he makes it sound like, that it's just falling to pieces all over, it's totally fractured, but that's not the case of the church.
You mean like Protestantism?
Yeah. But yeah, funny about that. The more the RLDS church adopted a Protestant worldview, the more it fractured, like every other branch.
Yeah. Okay. So kind of a lot of stuff. I know we are going pretty quickly. The guest is Dr. Travis Kearns. I believe he mentioned, but I'll reiterate here. He received his PhD from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in apologetics. Now, I don't know explicitly what that program looked like, but to me, this is when I looked up the university online and I was just kind of flipping through their about sections on their website. This is very much a university that is a seminary for apologetics and for teaching their students to become ministers, to form ministries and so forth. And so this is not a biblical studies degree. This is not like a Hebrew studies degree or Greek studies or anything like that. This is an apologetics degree, and he chose his topic as Mormonism, Mormon epistemology.
In fact, I have the abstract pulled up.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So I'll just go through this quickly. We wouldn't want to go through the whole dissertation even if we could access it, but apparently only students of the institution can access the actual dissertation.
I'm sure we could get it.
Here's what he says. And you let me know. I mean, this is framed very academically, as it should be for an abstract and all that, but try to read between the lines of what he's really saying here. So the abstract reads, this dissertation examines the notion of truth within the context of the theological framework of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Chapter 1 introduces the topic by focusing on the need to study the Latter-day Saints, giving particular attention to the numerical growth of the Church, the financial affluence of the Church, and the political influence of the Church. Attention is also given to the history of the notion of truth in the history of philosophy and the methodology of the study. Chapter 2 offers a full examination of the notion of truth within the theological framework of the Church. Specific attention is given to Latter-day Saint scriptures, presidents, publications, and scholarship. Chapter 3 examines the doctrines of God and continuing revelation within the Latter-day Saint tradition. Taking these two doctrines into account, the chapter then investigates the historical and theological issues surrounding Latter-day Saints and plural marriage. Chapter 4 addresses the points originally raised in the thesis. Information from the second and third chapters is examined and combined, conclusions are drawn, and areas of further study are explored. This work contends that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints cannot make the claim to hold to absolute truth, thereby seriously questioning the ability of the members of the Church to have any hope in their beliefs. This dissertation further argues that Latter-day Saints should be considered epistemological relativists and fideists. So basically, this guy spent 4 to 6 years ruminating on old evangelical anti-Mormon tropes and wrote a paper on it.
We're the most non-relativistic faith out there. Like, what?
Yeah. Reading between the lines, I'm imagining it goes something like, they have doctrines, they have scriptures, but they have prophets that at any point they could just completely overturn everything that came before because they believe in an open canon and ongoing revelation. So that means ultimately all that Mormons are cult followers of a prophet.
Well, we could get into that with the video.
Yeah. Really quick. I just got a chat from Robert. So he will be joining us here in just a minute. I'm going to send the link over to him. In the meantime, let's get back to the video and I'll get Robert set up here.
Our favorite Patty.
That's right.
Yeah,
Rigdon, the Smith, Sidney Rigdon movement, just because those are the two main guys that kind of get everything moving. Some breakoff groups in Mormonism don't even use the word Mormon in their nomenclature. So when we talk about the LDS Church, usually we're referring to one that's headquartered in Salt Lake City. It's the biggest of the breakoff groups. Scholars call it the Brighamites because they follow Brigham Young after Smith dies. But their official numbers they release every year. They release those in April at their general conference. They meet twice a year for semi-annual and annual general conference. April always brings the statistical report for the previous year. This past year, they released the numbers with about 17 million members around the world. They are by far the largest. I'll use this term and we can define it later if we want to. Usually this is the one that gets me in trouble. They're by far the largest cult group that's ever broken out of Christianity, if you don't count Islam as a cult group that's broken out of Christianity. Mormonism is by far the largest. Jehovah's Witnesses have about 2 million. Christian Science is far smaller. Scientology is smaller. Mormonism is without a doubt the largest that there is. Yeah, so about 17 million around the world, the majority of which are outside the U.S. now, not inside.
You know, it's interesting. I think, if we were to do a show on Scientology, people would be interested because, Tom Cruise and they did several exposés on Scientology that everyone was fascinated with on Netflix and other things. But it seems as though people want to give Mormonism, I'm not trying to be, jerky about it, but they kind of give them a pass. Like I don't quite understand it, but I really like Glenn Beck and he talks about Jesus all the time. So surely, this can't be that bad or at least tolerable. Maybe they're just Amish people with cars. I mean,
they're Mennonites, but a little different.
Yeah. So tell me this, why do so many Christians kind of believe that Mormons are kind of Christian too. What leads them to kind of include them into their group?
Yeah, historically that's not been the case. It's really only been the case since World War II. So really the late 1940s and early 1950s is when this shift occurred. And that comes down more, not to a Mormon, an evangelical or Protestant Christian thing, it comes down more to a sociology of religion issue. So prior to World War II, when soldiers were going out to fight, they really didn't fight alongside anybody other than Protestants and Catholics. Those were the two main groups fighting alongside of each other. Not against each other, but just alongside of each other. World War II hits, and suddenly there's this massive boom of Latter-day Saint soldiers that go to the Western European theater and fight alongside Protestants and Catholics. In the sociology of religion, when you allow your group to serve in the military, Mormons did prior to that, but this is the big kind of influx is World War II. So early 1940s, mid 1940s, when those soldiers are fighting alongside Mormons, and those soldiers are Baptist or Catholic or Presbyterian or whatever, and they come back home, they don't see the Mormon as the weirdo next door anymore, quote unquote. He's not the guy who's going to sacrifice babies in the basement, in some candles in the shape of a pentagram. Yeah. He's the guy who loves his wife, loves his kids, fought in the military, he's as American as apple pie, drives a nice car, has a nice house, that sort of thing. So that's really when it happened, is in the late 1940s, early 1950s. And then you get a significant shift with a former president of the LDS Church named Gordon B. Hinckley, who moves just from a visual standpoint, moves the church, the LDS Church, from kind of sect on the side over here or cult group on the side into just by doing visual things, moving it more into a Christian realm. So just as an example, prior to his push in the 1980s to do this, the logo for the church had all the same size letters, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, if you look at the logo of the church, you will see the Church of and Latter-day Saints in small font and Jesus Christ in the middle in large font, in large letters. And that's to show just a visual stress on Jesus.
Yeah, the marketing counts.
Just a marketing ploy.
Yeah.
They changed the Book of Mormon from a paperback book that had the angel Moroni on the front, the golden angel on top of the temples with the trumpet. It just said the Book of Mormon with a picture of Moroni on it. They changed it to a black leather-looking book with gold lettering that just says the Book of Mormon, and then they added a subtext, another testament of Jesus Christ.
Trying to get that name
So,
out there.
so they put that on the front. It had always been there, but they added it to the front. And then you add the logo on the back with Jesus Christ in bigger letters, and they start sending missionaries around the U.S. pretty significantly. So it's really a visual marketing, advertising type push is really where all this comes from.
Wow.
Yep.
And I think maybe, and this is just a guess on my part, but as the world becomes more and more corrupt in its obvious rebellion against the Lord, where you have gender identity coming in, you have homosexuality becoming accepted in very, very liberal, quote unquote, churches and denominations that have walked away from the Bible but has embraced LGBTQ ideology. And when your enemy becomes so hideous and clear, when someone walks up next to you and say, hey, let's fight this together, it's really hard to care about differences at that point.
Right.
I think that's probably one of Glenn Beck's strongest connections to Christians is that, look, and this is something I think Glenn Beck always brings up, is that we need to join together if we're going to fight this fight. And it's a very obvious fight, and it is an ugly fight, and the enemy is terrifying in when they're slaughtering babies and they are cutting up children's bodies just because the child decided they're a different gender, and you have adults indulging these things. When someone like Glenn Beck says, hey, let's join together and fight this, and I love Jesus too, it's hard to get all theological and say, well, wait a minute, Glenn, before we fight together. And so you can see how...
Wait, hold on. Can we pause? Can we pause? I'm sorry. Again, he's bringing up Glenn Beck, and I'm not trying to be political with this, and I'm not going to be. My problem with what he's doing here is he's attacking the good fruits for a second time. It's the second time. We're a few minutes in. He's attacking the good fruits of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Like, there's a problem that we do good things in the world. I don't know how to make it make sense. I don't know if Robert wants to tag on that, but it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, everybody welcome Robert.
Yeah, welcome, Robert. Yeah, quick context, Robert.
Everyone's favorite Patty.
That's right.
Yeah. He was saying that Catholics and Protestants actually fought on the same side. I know that's unusual, but that's actually how it works over here. So,
Yeah.
Well, those Jesuits up to their tricks. Who knows what they're doing? But some of the stuff he said previously, like the subtitle "Another Testament of Jesus Christ" was added in 1982 before the Hinckley presidency that began in 95, and it was always plugged, even then, as Another Testament of Jesus Christ. And there was a lot of movements even before Hinckley. I mean, like you had you had David O. McKay, really make the church into more of a mainstream entity, if you will. Say what you will about Greg Prince and these other stuff, like the Skittles movement, so we won't be demonetized, but his biography of David O. McKay is an excellent work on that topic. And the idea like the church has been trying to be more Christian in just recent years, that's not the case. I've documented, like, say, in the 20s and 30s, the church emphasizing grace, the centrality of Christ. Even this week, I read a book by Nephi Jensen, who was a general authority from 1950, called The World's Greatest Need, where it's basically any work we do, only if it's empowered by God's grace, Christ's grace, can it be efficacious in the eyes of God. That's very Pauline, if you will. And that's 1950, when the church was really like Rome's the great whore and all that at the same time. So I think I come across this Kearns guy before. He's understanding the church is piss poor at best, so not really surprising.
Yeah, he has a book out, and I failed to remember the name of it. Something about Zion, but
I vaguely remember reading that book years ago and not thinking it wasn't like say as bad as say the God Makers, but at the same time that's a low bar. But yeah,
It's the Saints of Zion: An Introduction to Mormon Theology, 2018. It's obviously garbage.
Oh wait, the guy has a PhD.
Yeah.
Yeah, from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary.
Oh, I was going to
Ben
say
McDonald has a
so
PhD.
does Julie Hanks, but
Well,
that's
yeah.
too mean.
Well,
Yeah,
and not to go off a rabbit trail, I do think there is a lot of really interesting things to consider and analyze across the history of the church in this last dispensation. I am personally of the amateur opinion that the Reed Smoot hearings really broke the spirit of Joseph F. Smith, and that was like a big hinge point for how we try to interact with everyone else.
he was. If you actually read the transcripts, which being the nerd I am, I've read all of them. He was trying to be like deliberately a very difficult witness. I mean, trying to be as vague as possible. So, but that kind of did cause the church to be a bit more reclusive afterwards. It's like but to be fair, I don't blame him. The government was actually going after them.
Well, and this guy, he talks about it later, how the government came out. And in one of the instances, Robert, if you haven't seen this, he flat out lies, like objectively flat out lies. Oh, these things are so convenient for Mormons, with Revelation and stuff. But we'll probably get there. But like the whole thing with drawing those parallels to like they just don't take a charitable view. Government oppression, the Protestant oppression by mobs. Like, can you at least have some charity and say sorry?
Yeah, but it's like the video we were reviewing yesterday on my live stream. Celebrating 11 years of the blog.
Yeah.
It seems to be boundary maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't see this guy actually doing well on any discussion with an informed Latter-day Saint. I don't think he'd do well against me. He wouldn't do well against you or Jacob or Sam here. But it seems to be boundary maintenance. So anything that make us look weird and culty.
Yeah.
Because he probably does still believe that we are, with a nuanced understanding, a cult.
Yeah, he called us a cult group 3 times already, I think.
Yeah.
Twice at least.
Yeah, but the top he said.
Does he actually define how he actually uses the term cult?
Nope.
Or has he?
He just said he said no. What he did is he said cult group, then he said break off sect / cult group, and that's what he said.
And movement, anything to avoid like a legitimate terminology.
But I think historians would agree, like in some sense, Protestantism as a whole is in some way a break off of Roman Catholicism, even if they say it's a reformation going back ad fontes. So does that mean ipso facto it's a cult?
Right. Yeah. That would be too much of a logical draw to make, So they're not going to do it.
No, and I don't know if Travis Kearns is reformed or not. I think he might be, but I could be wrong. But a lot of what the host talks about and the way he frames things makes me seem that they're probably reformed.
Predestined to bad theology.
Yeah.
The talk we're giving right now could probably sound very contentious.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up just kind of the cultural battle aspect of it. Dr. Albert Mohler, who's president at the Southern Baptist Theological Center in Louisville, was invited to speak at BYU 2016, 17, somewhere in there, maybe 18. So he's in the Marriott Center, that's the basketball arena, that's where they have their campus-wide devotionals. He's standing at center court, which is funny as well because Dr. Mohler doesn't like sports at all. But he's standing at center court at the basketball arena, and he used a line in his talk that made the front page of the Salt Lake Tribune and Deseret News, which are the 2 main newspapers in Utah. And he said, "I do not believe we will go to heaven together, but I believe we may go to jail together."
Oh, wow.
And it was a very powerful line to show, look, we have these massive theological differences that are significant, but culturally, as you mentioned with Glenn Beck, we're probably going to agree on just about everything.
Yeah.
Now, there are theological reasons why we do things and why Mormons do things, and those theological reasons are different, vastly different. Yeah. But theological reasoning aside, we're going to agree on cultural issues.
Boy, wow. So he had the, I mean,
Well, if he's referencing Albert Mohler, I'm guessing he is reformed because Mohler's a big reformed / Calvinistic figure. So.
I looked it up. It says he's from available evidence, he is aligned with Reformed theology. His most recent activities with SBTS and NAMB and the Three Rivers Baptist Association. So he seems to have a Calvinistic Baptist framework in his writings. Now that's grok, but I mean, I didn't have a better way to look it up that fast. Well, could be true. Seems to be.
According to my belief system and God's word, you're going to hell.
Right.
But there's still an appreciation over the cultural wars that we're fighting. And so, wow, okay. Now that's interesting because that's going to lead to a question I'm going to have towards the end about how do we deal with keeping our distinctions.
Sure.
And still, you know, do we just never do anything with these people? So we'll deal with that in a minute. But before we get there, can you give us, and this is going to be difficult, and people are going to complain about this, but can you give us a very fast, brief, like 2-minute history of the Mormon Church, how it came to become Latter-day Saints today, in just a couple minutes to just give us this brief overview? Because from what I understood, the Mormon Church is one of the most American churches ever because everything kind of centers around America in their system.
That's
so
true.
give us a little bit of a history.
Okay, pause real quick.
LDS Church, one LDS.
Okay, everyone, we have now crested the roller coaster. We are about to go down through the rest of the show. This is gonna be great.
Oh yeah, everything up to this point was the good stuff. This was everything that they have built up to this point is just kind of the clinking up to the top of the roller coaster. We're in it now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing we'll be pausing a lot in the next few minutes.
Well, yeah.
That's how much we want to take down in one bite or not.
Yeah, and if we want to slow the video down back to regular speed, because I have it at 1.5 right now, then we can do that and take it kind of one bite at a time. But yeah, we'll try to get through as much as we can.
Yeah, when Kearns is talking, I think let's just have it regular speed.
Yeah, let me do that right now because he's going to talk for the next couple minutes.
Once said is the history of Joseph Smith. So he's born early 19th century in the Northeast in Sharon, Vermont. Grows up in a fairly religious household where his parents took him to Baptist, Presbyterian, and Methodist churches. And he, as you might imagine, between those three groups, he heard some varying theology, specifically on things like salvation, on eternal security, not necessarily on the Bible, but on baptism, on communion, on church governance, things like that. So at the age of 14, as the official story goes, though there are 9 different versions of this in Smith's own hand, the official story goes at 14, he went out in some woods behind his house. He had just been reading James 1:5, if you lack wisdom, ask of the Lord, and he'll give it to you. He went out in some woods, he prayed for wisdom, and his story purports that the Father and the Son appeared to him in bodily form and told him, don't listen to any of these churches, they're all apostate. Don't listen to any of their teachers, they're apostate. You will restore the true church to the earth.
Hey, Jacob, go ahead and give us a pause there.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Robert a question because he probably wants to make the same point. In Joseph Smith's own hand, isn't there only one account? Aren't the other
there's only one account in his hand. Everything else is either dictated or through someone else like Orson Pratt or what have you. Also, Joseph would have learned about the Bible. It wasn't simply Presbyterian, Methodist, and Baptist. I mean, his grandparents, as well as his father, were Universalists and non-denominational, not like blind Baptists, but like they were like, say, into like the whole divisions within Christianity as well, religious seekers. There's a lot of other stuff as well. The professors are called corrupt, but like he wasn't told like say, oh, and you will start a church at the first vision. And yes, there's 9 different accounts, and I think that's kind of thrown out as like say a boogie bear, But there's 4 different accounts of the resurrection. There's different accounts of the institution narrative of the Eucharist, and there's actually differences. Like, did Jesus say, "I won't celebrate with this with you until they come into the kingdom," before, after the consecration, some other issues as well, like the number of angels at the event. And so it's not an issue, unless you're going to engage like Robert Bowman, like double standards, and a lot of stuff was just thrown out there without like proper clarity and nuance, not to sound like Michael Lofton, but just listening to that, you think like, say, he wasn't well read in the Bible, he wouldn't have studied the Bible, which is nonsense. And it wasn't simply eternal security, but then again, like say bringing up baptism, regeneration, and ecclesiology would not exactly be topics this guy would like to discuss, especially when it comes to the biblical data.
Yeah, I like that you brought up about his father and grandparents, because in his own house, didn't his mom and a sister and one brother join one church, and then the other brother's another?
I know his mom was. I know his mother and some of his family were attending the Presbyterian church. His father wasn't attending any because he was informed by Eziel and others, who are like religious speakers, universalists and the like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, just
and of course, like once the minister said Alvin was in hell because he was unbaptized, that was kind of a bit of a downer, isn't it?
I would imagine. Who's going to swallow that pill? But I guess a lot of people back then did, because where else did they turn, right? So.
Well, if you're a Calvinist and you believe in total depravity, you have to believe infants go to hell.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you believe in, like, say, infantile fate, or like, say, what some of the Puritans did. Like, yeah, infant baptism normally does not regenerate, but it regenerates elect infants. You're elected to die, and some kind of gymnastics vis-a-vis that issue. But yeah, it's. But that's a different kettle of fish. To be fair, he didn't bring that up, so.
Yeah. I like how a lot of people explain it. I know some people dog on it sometimes. Oh, and by the way, there's multiple accounts of Jesus's birth as well. But how it gets explained is, if I'm telling my wife something about someone in our family or a friend, she doesn't need a lot of background context or the same background context as if I were to tell one of you three something about the same situation. And so it might be longer. It might include totally different details. There's a lot of reasons why a story comes out differently to different people.
Yeah, and
we shouldn't have like lawyerly recitements every time we say something.
Yeah, and there's a difference between like Joseph recounting it on the personal level for his like diary to, like, say, a non-Latter-day Saint for publication, say, A Passa Ecclesia and other works as well.
Yep. Sorry, Jacob.
Yeah, no, and I was going to say, with respect to a lot of what differences we might see in the biblical texts, when you look across like the Gospels, for example, as they present a particular event or some saying that Jesus spoke. These are people who are recounting or recalling things that happened 10, 20, 30 years prior. I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt to people to not remember everything precisely as it happened, but that doesn't necessarily call into question their sincerity or the actuality of the events themselves. Just their ability to recall certain details, or to purport those details in a manner that is specific to their audience.
LDS Church. That happens in 1820. And it happens in a place, again, in the Northeast. That's kind of where the big bullseye is for Mormonism in its history. So he has this vision. He eventually, in 1827, supposedly finds some golden plates that have been buried in a hill by an ancient people group. He supposedly digs them up and translates them, though translation is a very loose term, because he never uses the plates to actually come up with the Book of Mormon. But over a period of a few months, close to a year, he produces what's now called the Book of Mormon. It's a history of people from 700 BC to about 300 AD that left the ancient world, ancient Jerusalem, to come to the ancient Americas. Where that is, Mormons disagree vehemently. So it's somewhere in South America, Central America, or North America. Okay. If you want to get BYU professors into a heated discussion very quickly, you can walk into a room and say Heartland, which is North America, or South American theory, go. They will go at each other.
Get him, Robert.
If you actually query any BYU professor, they all unanimously agree it took place somewhere in Central America. No one in the BYU area place believes in the Heartland model or South American model. Not to sound like elitist here, but like absolutely every single archaeologist and anthropologist in the church worked their weight in salt believes in some type of Central American setting. It's only a few people, largely, I would say, informed by eisegesis of the text and like an American centrism, that thinks it took place in the Heartland. Sorry to anyone who thinks otherwise, even if you may be on this panel, I'm sorry. So and to be fair, like most would be willing to concede, like say most LDS scholars do believe we have a good idea like where it took place, Central America. And when it comes to the old world, we have a wealth of evidence that all sides agree supports its geography, like Nahum, the River Leman, Valley of Lemuel, Bountiful, Shazar, and a host of other issues. And what's rather interesting, like he kind of glosses over this, but he doesn't actually discuss like Joseph's narrative about, say, the plates, like writing on metal plates, use of a stone box, Semitic language using the Egyptian script, and mountain repositories and so forth. That's all part and parcel of the ancient Near East and the ancient world. Tratnos has an excellent book that's on the Scripture Central Archive, the Book of Mormon, Other Hidden Books from 2000. That kind of shows like Joseph's narrative and the Book of Mormon's narrative about plates themselves fit, like, say, the ancient milieu. So, like, the very basic core claims about the plates fits antiquity better than most people in the 19th century could have faked, based on, say, the Bible and other literary sources available as well. And also, like, the Book of Mormon took place circa 600 to 400, so, you know, that's kind of a bit of a school by error, as we would say, and the English would also say here. So, yeah, and also, like, it's a translation, but, like, no one claims Joseph actually knew the language underlying the plates. So, yeah, it's not a translation in the same way, like, say, as someone who speaks Irish as a first language, I might translate into English into a second language or into Hebrew as a fifth or sixth language or what have you. You know, some of the languages I know in varying degrees. No, it's more like, say, it wasn't based on the revelation, but it's still a translation. You know, 19th century English was what came out to convey the meaning underlining the plates. The same when it comes to the Book of Abraham and other sources as well. So it is a translation, just like, it's not a normative translation, like, say, how, say, Jacob, you know, you might, like, because I think you're still studying Hebrew, you might, like, translate some Hebrew into English, because you know, at least the underlying Hebrew you might know. So, yeah, but I think this is like more like, say, the David Falk, like, it's a Docetic text or some other nonsense that he did on the Inspiring Philosophy channel with respect to the Book of Abraham. So
yeah, so on that, Kerry Muhlestein, I believe he's the one I follow the most out of the Egyptologists. He probably does the most online. Stephen Smoot does a lot of writing. I haven't seen him online as much, but was talking about how it was a point you brought up about how Egyptian is used in Semitic languages throughout the Near East. And there's nothing uncommon about the reuse. And I forget the term. There's two terms, really. I've used them many times, particularly like trying to talk to Forrest Hansen and guys like that. But there's two terms for in antiquity where we would think it's plagiarism. One is for images and depictions and
iconotropy.
Iconotropy is one, and then the other one, like, where it's the same symbols, like we're seeing with the Egyptian in another language, meaning something else. And so it's not just that Egyptian itself can change over time, which we know it did because there's various forms of it, but that it's borrowed because it's what's familiar. They don't have their own writing system yet.
Yeah, and the Coptic alphabet is like a prime example. It's basically like an adoption of like a lot of Koine Greek for the similar phonemes. And for like a very good book on iconotropy, you know, this came out a few years ago.
Just have that at hand.
Yes.
But the way I like to also tell people, again, this is to try to make it personal, is if you look at the Cyrillic language, or not language, the Cyrillic alphabet, this was done in like the 13th century. By some monks who were trying to unify different Slavic tribes. And what did they need? They needed a unified language. So what did they do? They borrowed from different languages to create a new alphabet that matched the sounds by assigning signs to the sounds and said, ta-da. And it's actually the original Slavic or Cyrillic, and to the Slavic languages, I should say, incredibly Christian, because each symbol actually has an iconotropy associated to it. Each of the letters is an iconotropy. And their sound is something that relates to something holy. When you say the sound of the letter, like Yah, which it means me or I, Yahweh, it's actually associated to I am. So it's really cool how that happens. And it doesn't hurt that languages borrow off of each other. Because in a way, Yah also goes back to Ra from Egyptian.
Yeah, I will point out because I do want to say something about geography as well, but with regards to the way that a lot of people use Yahweh or the Tetragrammaton to refer to I am, or like I am that I am, that's actually, if you read from Exodus 3 and 6 when it says I am and I am sent you when he's talking to Moses. It's not the tetragrammaton. It's Esher Ehe Esher Ehe. So it's a lot of people will say, well, Yahweh means I am or whatever. It doesn't. We actually don't know specifically what Yahweh would have meant. There's a lot of different theories around what it meant.
There's like a debate, like is it like causative, like I will be who I will be, I will cause to be, and stuff like that. So
yeah, but we really don't know for sure. And the only thing we do know for sure is when we're reading Yahweh talking to Moses and saying, who shall I say sent me? Tell him I am that I am sent you, or I am sent you. And the terms used for that is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. So just wanted to point that out real quick because I know somewhere somebody's going to be like, hey, wait a minute.
What I said about Russian is true, though. FYI. Anyway, go on.
I have no reason to not to disbelieve that. So with regard to geography, he brings up the fact that across different groups in the church, you will find people who hold to different geographical models of where the Book of Mormon may have taken place. I don't think many people who bring up this kind of argument as a sort of got you for Latter-day Saints have really thought it through. Even if we had no clue where it took place, even if we weren't very confident in the likelihood that it takes place in Central America. Let's take that off the table for a moment and just say we really don't know. It could be anywhere. Nothing short of finding a specific buried civilization with a big signpost that says "Welcome to Zarahemla" on it will convince them regardless. So what I found in most of those kinds of conversations with people is if it doesn't say explicitly, hey, this is Zarahemla, hey, this is Nephi, hey, this is wherever, it doesn't matter how much some artifact or some ruins may fit descriptions that we find in the Book of Mormon text. They're not going to believe anyway. So I find that to be kind of a dead end for a lot of people generally. But if we flip the script for a moment and say, because this particular argument of you guys don't know where this took place, so therefore, gotcha. If we flip the tables a little bit, just knowing where Jerusalem is and knowing where Egypt is and some of the places where we read about in the biblical texts does not equate to knowing that some miracle or supernatural event took place at those locations. Simply knowing where they are and being able to go there and stand on that road or see that ruin does not inherently mean that all of the miraculous events taking place and recorded in Scripture actually happened. So we have to be kind of we have to be aware of that, I think, when we talk to people too. I know Travis brings this up all the time on his channel, Missionary Discussions. And it's a really important point because it's one that I think a lot of people, Protestant or otherwise, probably haven't really considered. It's just
also the Doctrine Covenants has better archaeological verification than the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Touche. But anyways, I just wanted to make that point really clear before we move ahead through the video, because he's bringing up geography here, and I'm like, and
right. Okay. Did Moses cross and all of Israel cross the Red Sea? Where's the evidence? I believe it, right? Believe it, but where's the evidence now? You're gonna make this is what always bothers me with this argument. You're gonna make demands of us. Where are the gold plates and all this stuff? Okay, where's the Ark of the Covenant? Why is that allowed to be taken up into heaven?
No, but Michael, see, there are ruins underneath modern day Jerusalem.
Oh, that's right. In the
Ergo, the resurrection of Christ.
I forget that. Yeah, they've proven. Yeah, conspiracy theories.
Well, you know, Ron Wyatt and a bunch of other really awesome people have discovered all sorts of things. They just aren't allowed to talk about it.
Yep. Illuminati. Ooh.
Yep.
Very heated. So he produces the Book of Mormon, starts the church officially in 1830 as the Church of Christ, which turns into the Church of Christ of those in latter days, the Church of the Latter-day Saints, then eventually becomes the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Smith leads it until his death in 1844. At the time of his funeral, Brigham Young imitated Smith's mannerisms and his voice. The other leaders of the church assumed that Smith's anointing and prophetic mantle had fallen on Brigham Young.
That was quick.
Could we? I'm sorry. This guy is like, say, the school kid who procrastinated for like an entire semester and decided like to read a quick article the night before the exam and just hoping something sticks. I'm sorry. The whole transfiguration of Joseph Smith did not take place at Joseph Smith's funeral. It took place sometime afterwards during the debate about the succession crisis. How he got the idea it took place at his funeral is beyond me. I'm sorry, but really?
This is the guy who struts around with decades of Mormon apologetics under his belt, ministering to people in Utah. Like,
he used to
is
play.
the
I have never heard that before in any accounting of Latter-day Saint history, so that stood out. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's a.
Does he fill in in this? Like, does he actually fill in the blanks between 1830 to 1844?
No, not really. No.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna get a very, very glossed over
Yeah.
view here.
Yeah, I think the next point he makes is he's going to start jumping into polygamy here very soon. So I think it might be
based.
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember. Yeah.
Joseph was born. He didn't know what to do. He had a vision. Polygamy, dead.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
With Brigham Young. They got to Independence, Missouri, and a group stopped there believing that Joseph Smith's son, Joseph Smith III, was his handpicked successor. Joseph's wife, Emma, believed that as well. So Emma, Joseph Smith III, and a fairly sizable group stayed in Independence. They formed the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is the first breakoff group. They're still there today, though. They're called the Community of Christ. And the rest of the Brighamites followed Brigham Young all the way to the Great Salt Lake Valley. They arrived July 24th, 1847.
Wow.
So July 24th is, in Utah, Pioneer Day, because that's when the pioneers hit the Great Salt Lake Valley. From 1847 until now, they've been headquartered in Salt Lake City, and they've grown from a few hundred when it was first started by Smith to now 17 million around the world in any nation that will allow somebody to come in openly as a religious missionary.
Wow.
Just a correction. He seems to be given the impression the LDS, now Community of Christ, was founded around 1847, thereabouts.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually founded, like, say, in the 1850s, 1860s. So it wasn't the contemporaneous movement when Brigham Young was moving west. It's something that developed sometime afterwards.
Also, we're doing the Great Commission. Sounds like another good fruit to judge us by. Weird.
Well, you know, he's got to find something to criticize.
Yeah.
Interestingly, they're also the wealthiest religion on the planet. Roman Catholicism has been around since probably the 6th or 7th century. Mm-hmm. They have about $2 billion in assets. The Mormon Church, though they've never released their numbers, a church worker a few years ago got a little irritated with all the money that was being hoarded, so to speak, in Salt Lake, downloaded all of their financial information because he worked for the finance office of the church, released it to a friend of his who worked for a major newspaper called the New York Times, and it was discovered that the Mormon Church has about $200 billion in assets and property.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay, pause.
Even Elon Musk would raise his eyebrows at that.
Substantial money, substantial influence. They are, they control the state of Utah. About 65 to 70% of Utah is LDS. The governor, lieutenant governor, 4 of the 5 state Supreme Court justices, about 90% of the state House and Senate are LDS. Doctors, lawyers, firemen, policemen, bankers, you name it, they're Mormon.
Wow.
Yep.
Can,
Now,
can,
I don't want
can
to
we
spend a
can
lot
we
of
can we jump in here?
Yeah.
This first of all, the whole demagoguery, like, well, the Mormons are taking over. It's like just replace them with Jews in Hollywood, and that's kind of the demagoguery
Exactly.
I think he's trying to aim
That's what I
for.
said earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even proceeding from that, the dirty Zionists, such as Alan Hansen, he made like some other comments as well, like kind of really he seems to think like the Roman Catholic Church was founded in the 6th or 7th century, but beyond the crack pipe he's smoking, what's his source for that?
Trust me, bro.
He seems like I'd like to know like why the 6th or 7th century? Why do you think that's Roman Catholicism? Because like some Protestants will claim like, well, there's no point you can actually claim to say that's the Roman Catholic institution, except maybe you see the Council of Trent when they interacted directly with Protestantism. But like that's demagoguery. And yes, the church is a very wealthy institution. # make it a trillion. So what? I mean, look at all the charity we spend the money on. I mean, there's a really good article that I helped with before I left the B.H. Roberts Foundation on the $100 billion fund and the whole legal furore about that. But look at the wealth of like say Hindu temples in India next to like say gold mines and stuff like that. They're pretty wealthy religious organization. And like when it comes to Rome and other churches, it's very hard to actually gauge how much they are actually worth because they're such a large group. It's very easy to understand like say what a 17 million follower religion is, but when you have like say the Roman Catholic institution, where like they have like the various rites and like say the national churches in like Germany and Ireland, it's very difficult to guess like what their total assets are, especially when some of them are priceless assets as well, like artwork in the Vatican, and all that as well. So, but it just really strikes me as just demagoguery. Like, and like if you take like 60-70% LDS, of course, like at least 60 to 70% of LDS are represented, like say when it comes to say the statistics when it comes to say doctors, governors, and those in church. It's like say the weird Scottish minister who's like half Pakistani complaining about all the white Scottish judges. It's like it's 90% white. What do you expect?
Right.
65 to 70% LDS. What do you expect in Utah?
I guess they're all supposed to be working in a shoe factory. I don't know.
Well, I found I don't know. Like you said, Robert, it could be hard to like evaluate give a valuation of an organization's net worth or holdings or whatever. But to think that so the Catholic Church would claim a 2,000-year history, for us it would be a 200-year history. Then for us to have 200 billion, and he told that the Catholic Church has 2 billion. So for us to be around for a tenth as long, but to have 100 times as much wealth as the Catholic, I don't know where he's getting this
that
from.
also does not make sense because there's 800 to 1 billion Catholics worldwide, and like let's just say like probably the majority are like nominal Catholics. It really strikes me as odd. Like say the average value would be like say $2. I mean, no.
20.
I mean, like just like think of the cathedrals and the very expensive chalices and patens you have to have as a Catholic, and all that. The assets would be astronomical, and that's not like demagoguery against Catholics, but at the same time, there's a lot of assets fixed and current. When that institution as a whole is very hard to gauge because of how the finances are done. It's not like centralized as it would be in say Salt Lake for us.
Well, not like so. How much would Notre Dame sell for if they were to sell it? Right. I mean, 20 billion, 30 billion. Like it's Notre Dame. They'd get an inexplicable amount of money. Like so, us having holdings and what that report showed was our total holdings. It's like me saying, "Oh well, I'm not going to say the number, but my retirement accounts are worth this much." So clearly, I don't have that much, and if I pull it out, I stop making my retirement, and I don't retire when I want to.
Yeah, and also like for the troll in the comments who not really interacting with anything we're saying, read the Mormon or article or any of the sources with respect to say the legal aspects of say the disclosures and all that.
Yeah, I'll say just in response to people in the chat. This is a broader conversation and not directly tied to what we're reacting to now, but I would just say culturally in the church and perhaps broadly everywhere, I don't think it's appropriate for us to be thinking of our church membership in the same way that we think of our citizenship. That at least in America, it's founded on this revolutionary mindset of the government is there to serve the people, and there is a mandate to keep them accountable and to be watchdogs of the government, it's not the same. It's not the same thing with the Lord's restored church. There is accountability, there is responsibility,
I
but
hold God responsible. I am the one that adjudicates him. How dare you, Sam? Just kidding. Totally kidding.
yeah, it's like we're not just tucking our heads in the sand or anything on this, but there is an order in the Lord's church, and it's not the same as how the American government is run. So it's not the same way we interact with it as citizens or church members.
That's right.
I'm on this because I think the Mormon Church probably thinks they've handled this, and I don't know why people keep bringing it up. But just very quickly, I think everyone knows that when the Mormon Church first started, men were allowed to have more than one wife, and they fought that in America for a while. And then, from my understanding, they came to a place where they, and this is trying to be as generous as I can,
It was not allowed. Joseph Smith had a revelation that's still recorded in the Doctrine and Covenants, which is one of their 4 books of Scripture, that allows for plural marriage, and that was allowed until September 24th, 1890. Leading up to September 24th, 1890, the U.S. government and the territory of Utah had applied for statehood. They wanted to be the state of Deseret originally, which is supposedly a Book of Mormon word meaning hard worker or honeybee. When the U.S. Congress found out that that's what they wanted the state to be called and why, they said, no, how about we name it Utah after the Native American Utes who were there. So hence the University of Utah are the Utes. So the U.S. government got tired of all these plural marriage advocates in Utah, including Brigham Young, who was the territorial governor when the territory was first opened. They started fining leaders of the church. They fined the church itself. There's actually a Supreme Court case called United States versus the late Corporation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because the federal government unincorporated the LDS Church. They took all their assets, all the money and all the land, and leased it back to them at approximately 10 to 15 times what it was worth in order to bankrupt them. On September 23rd, 1890, then president of the church, Wilford Woodruff, wrote in his personal journal, I've come to the point, as president of the church, where something must be done in order to save Zion, which is their understanding of what Utah and the church is. The next day, September 24th, he claims to have had a revelation from God stopping plural marriage. And so for the Salt Lake branch of the church, the largest of the breakoff groups, there's been officially no plural marriage allowed since September 24th, 1890.
Wow.
So about 135 years-ish.
Okay.
Okay, let's go through all this. I'll let you go first, Michael.
Okay, so my issue is on the principle of thinking that because you get to a crisis point, you're not supposed to receive revelation. What an anti-biblical thing to do and say. Think, like, really? So when this might be loosely tangential or something, but like when Elijah's on the mountain and his servant is like, oh no, we're surrounded, and that's a crisis point, isn't it? And Elijah says, don't worry, those who are with us are more than they against us. And then the servant's eyes are opened. His servant's eyes didn't need to be opened until the crisis point. Is there something wrong with that? Was this like I'm there's so many examples. You get to the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army is behind you. Now what do? What is wrong with a crisis point revelation or miracle? Anyway, that was my point.
yeah. Now I'm imagining the Israelites looking at Moses putting his staff in the water and say, "Oh, well, that's convenient, Moses."
Yeah. Are you going to come though? Oh yeah, I'm coming.
Okay, well, I kind of made like some quick notes about like some of the stuff he said. First of all, he said like it was first allowed or first practiced by the church, but he doesn't say when. It's like the very first plural marriage seems to be like 1835 or 1836 with Fanny Alger. Chris Smith, who's never been a Latter-day Saint, and Don Bradley, who we all know, I hope, they've actually done a very good job showing it probably took place sometime after April 1836. And initially, Fanny and Joseph was like a adoptive sealing, and it only later became a eternity-only sealing in the recent signature books in plural marriage. One of the most egregious things is like, say, University of Utah is called the Utes. It's actually called BYU Rejects. That's a joke.
Oh my gosh.
That's I'm sorry, that's a joke. I just had to throw that in. Yeah. Let's see. He mentions like section 132, the Doctrine and Covenants. But Joseph was actually teaching polygamy, but like it was largely a secret thing for like a number of people in the Nauvoo era. It only became like public October 1852 when Brigham Young got Orson Pratt to officially announce it. And what was rather interesting, like Pratt was an early critic of it, as we see during the whole Sarah Pratt, John C. Bennett affair, double entendre intended. Let's see. With respect to, say, Wilford Woodruff, well, if you actually read Official Declaration 1, this is rather explicit. You don't even have to go, say, to his journal entry or the contemporary sources for his entire sermon. He was actually given a vision as to what would happen. If it continued, the church would go bankrupt and its mission, like to reach the dead, preach the gospel, living, so on and so forth, would be retarded or thwarted. So he chose to, like, with a cessation of polygamy or plural marriage normatively. The one-man principle, which Brian Hales and others has mentioned with respect to Section 132, still continued. That's when you have post-Manifesto polygamy until like 1904 with the second Manifesto, with Joseph F. Smith in 1904, because there was the belief, like, say, normatively there would be no polygamy, but as long if the person in the church okayed it, then that would be acceptable. It's a bit more complex and nuanced than that, but that's the principle that underlines it. So, like, even when he's right, like, it's at most like half correct.
Well, and here's the other thing. There's an element of glee and like sadistic satisfaction that I've noticed among non-Mormons, anti-Mormons, where they'll talk about the martyrdom of Joseph Smith and say, like, basically he had it coming. We'll talk about how the church spent decades fighting and looking for legal redress and for the preservation of their constitutional rights to practice their religion as they felt consciously obliged to. And what ends up getting talked about, or how it's framed by, say, Kearns, is, yeah, these Mormons, they just had to be put in their place and have their institution disincorporated and then sued by the federal government and bankrupted and have their leaders imprisoned for practicing their religion. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's really convenient when you're on the winning side culturally.
And by the way, the Bible is full, like, say, revelations of convenience. One is, like, I think it's Judges 6 when it comes to Gideon and his fleece, if you're familiar with that narrative, and a number of other convenient revelations, okaying certain actions as well. So. And, like, we do believe, like, say, God uses, like, events that take place in space and time as instrumental causes to which oracles query God. Like Exodus 30, it's not the same thing, but like Exodus 32 and 33, like, basically God uses, like, his red hot anger to, like, try to get Moses to intercede and placate him before he actually wipes the Israelites out.
Yeah, so many examples with Moses. He strikes the rock for water to come out. Why? Because they're dying of thirst. Seems pretty darn convenient that there's just a rock that he could strike for water. I mean, yeah, bad argumentation there. God likes to do that last second save. He likes to be Michael Jordan and hit the game-winning bucket. Like, we like that too when we watch it. Why wouldn't God do it? I'm just kind of joking there, but there is a pattern there, and it doesn't make sense to just claim it's so convenient. Well, I guess the Bible is just so convenient.
Yeah, when I was thinking about this a little bit, the principle is, if you have a question about something and it's of importance, and the Lord can reveal things to you as needed, whether that's a life or death situation or something else. The point is, if there's something that is going to happen, needs to happen, will happen, and you need some bit of wisdom or information that only the Lord can give in that moment, we see those moments reflected throughout Scripture and throughout history. To take a less extreme example, even Acts chapter 10, when Peter receives the vision about the Gentiles and them receiving the gospel and so forth. I mean, there's a number of examples all throughout Scripture that we could point to. So I don't, again, a lot of people that make these kinds of rhetorical arguments don't seem to be able to apply that same lens or standard to their own view of scripture, their own theology.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Peter was just trying to grow his portfolio, Jacob. He needed more people to join the church to get their wealth and have $100 billion.
his purse was getting a little thin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we all want, and pork sandwiches are lovely. So come on, let's get rid of the
Yes.
culture.
I did it for the bacon.
Yeah. That should be a shirt.
That and lobster
With
rolls.
Peter being crucified upside down. I did it for the bacon.
Oh, no.
Oh, jeez. Oh, good one.
Revelations just in time.
Yeah, the same thing happened with African Americans in the priesthood in 1978. The federal government was going to move in and basically
No,
disband state government.
No. I'm sorry. I have to jump in already. If you look, this is even admitted by the Tanners in their book Mormonism, Shadow Reality, on the updating material, which they wrote after the initial 1972 edition. There's actually a telephone survey after the revelation given the priesthood to blacks. 78% or about 80% thereabouts of households queried in Utah were surprised that the revelation came, because many thought if the church were to cave into pressure, it would be in the 50s and 60s when there were movements against BYU and so forth. No one was really expecting in 1978 to happen. And
Not
if you
only
actually
that,
look at,
but-
say,
Oh, yeah. Go on.
oh, and just one train. If you read like Edward Spencer's biography of Spencer W. Kimball, which is an excellent biography, that was published by Deseret, he actually goes into like detail, especially in the manuscript version of it as a PDF. This was like a movement of internal reflection amongst church members and church leaders as like the history of the priesthood restriction, realizing like say the Missouri thesis, i.e. Joseph introduced the restriction in the Missouri period of church history, had no real backing because of Lester Bush's article and dialogue, and they've hosted other considerations as well. Again, like if the church were to like be accused of like giving into pressure, it would have took place in the 50s and 60s. There was no indication, like say the church's tax exempt status was actually about to be taken away. And Jeffrey Bradshaw has like done excellent work on say the history of the priesthood restriction that's now published on the Mormon Or website with primary historical sources as well. So yeah, again, like no, it's not because of like say internal pressure. Had it been like it would have been earlier, not in 1978, where like even the Tanners and other critics of it, like loads of people in the church were kind of shocked in Utah that such would be the case.
Absolutely. And my kind of point there is he's saying that the government was coming after the church. There is nothing. I looked after he said that. I looked. There's nothing that suggests the government was coming after the church for anything related to segregation. The laws that are being passed are civic, and they don't supersede the First Amendment to a religious institution if it wants to say that certain people aren't privileged to whatever in the church. There's not, like, they would have lost. There was no one coming after the church for this. The First Amendment was protective of the church. It could have kept going. It could still be going today. There might be some sects and there are other things out there doing things like that today. I don't know. But if, as an example, because people love to draw the parallel between, people of color, and because they include all other color, not just black, and LGBTQIA, SP, and all that. Well, we don't allow them to do what they want to do in the temple sometimes, with having same-sex marriages or being a transgender and going through under the guise of a different gender than they were born as, and things like that. And with all of the discrimination laws that have happened since 2014, you think that we would have caved. You think all this Title IX stuff and all these other things would start being applicable to the church, but there is a First Amendment in this country. And so we can't really say, I don't even know where you got the idea, because then it would be happening today, because they're using similar laws and tactics to do that. Although it was great for blacks to get civil rights, it's not great to force a church to recognize certain privileges within it that are related to our rituals, our ordinances. These aren't equivocations.
Yeah, and
Edward Kim. Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry, Jacob. Oh yeah, Edward Kimball. He's written, like, of course, like Lent in Your Stride. He also wrote a very good article. Spencer W. Kimball, who was his father, and the Revelation on Priesthood, BYU Studies, 2008. It's about like 70-something pages. He actually notes the following: some commentators scorned the "quote-unquote" convenience of a revelation that allowed a way out of an intolerable bind, but others noted accurately that it had been some years since any significant demonstrations against BYU and the church had occurred. External pressure was the lowest it had been for years in 1978 when the revelation took place. Again, loads of people thought if the church were to cave in, both internal and external church, like critics and the like, it would have been in the 50s and 60s. It was actually a huge surprise to loads of people, even critics, in 78.
And I'll add one more point. Sorry, Jacob. My dad has passed, but he told me the happiest day of his life before he got married was when he heard that revelation was given. The happiest day of his life was when he heard that revelation to be given. He was a student at BYU at the time. I don't know exactly when he heard it, but that's a pretty strong statement. And so there's probably a whole lot of faith, a whole lot of prayer, a whole lot of hope put into it, and a whole lot of charity being put into the hearts of the people of this church for that revelation to have come as well. It's not convenient. It's the Lord's will. It might be inconvenient that it didn't happen sooner, but it was the Lord's will. And if it's so joyous to the membership of the church, as what my dad said, my mom said it was wonderful for her too, but like, there's probably rejoicing on the other side of the veil too. There's a lot of preparation work going on in Africa. You can read about the African saints in the last volume of Saints, and some of the things that were happening there, and how there were people who ended up getting baptized into the church both pre and post Revelation, who were having visions and dreams, and many of them were of Brigham Young. And one of the first men to be ordained into the Melchizedek priesthood in Africa named his son Brigham after Brigham Young, because he relates that he had a revelation of Brigham Young telling him the time will be soon. I have been praying for you. Something about intercession of the saints might be in play there, Robert, huh? But but
well, as long as you think they're just praying for you and you're not praying to
correct.
them, I think
Yeah.
they were saying, yeah.
But like, so what a beautiful thing. And so the attacks on Brigham Young, I always swat away, because I'm like, if these guys are having these visions and Brigham Young is coming to them to give them assurance and show love, I'm not going to call the man a racist, even in today's lens. I'm just not going to do it. But other people can if they want to. I'm just saying, the journals, the stories, the history that exists within the church belies so many of the attacks when you actually go to the people who this policy should have been affecting the most, and yet it worked in the favor of turning them to Christ.
Yeah, this was a question that many leaders of the church had for decades. It took till 1978 for that revelation to come, and for President Kimball to be the president of the church at the time. But this was something that many leaders of the church prior to President Kimball had wrestled with. You can find a number of different examples of this in personal journals and records of the families of these general authorities. So it didn't all just come all at once either. It was a very long and sort of arduous, grueling struggle within the minds of the brethren for decades.
David O. McKay really did struggle with it if you read his presidential journals. For him, he was pretty convinced like Abraham 1 did teach it, but he really still struggled with it, especially when he came across, like, say, faithful colored members of the church, including young people as well. Even if you read, like, say, the abridged version of his presidential journals that came out a couple of years ago.
Yeah. I do want to point out real quick, we have a pretty lively chat at the moment. Through the Mist sent a super chat. So thank you. We appreciate that. He says, we definitely believe in a different Jesus than most of Protestantism. They know not the God they worship, literally. And we're going to actually get into some of Dr. Kearns' views about our conception of God and his nature pretty quickly, I think, in the next few minutes.
Well, I'll say through the mist, what's so hard to understand, right? I mean, 3 persons, 1 being, but the second person has 2 natures, and that's the reason why he could save us, but also God is completely other than us. So shut up and take your harp. So
And Jesus wasn't actually human. He was a divine person who assumed human nature. And he had 2 natures, but he's 1 person. But let's face it, most Protestants are functioning historian. So,
And that wouldn't be in the DSM-5 at all if you try to look that kind of psychology up. Nope.
yeah. Which Jesus is talking in this verse? Yeah.
Is he in the room with us right now? Sorry.
only in terms of his humanity, not his divinity.
Because they were very segregated in Utah. In fact, it was the last state to integrate. So,
Sorry, just pause real quick. I hadn't said my piece about
my bad.
The irony of a Baptist talking to us, accusing us of institutional racism. Like, I understand the whole blacks in the priesthood. That's like a huge thing, and it can be a really huge stumbling block for a lot of people. I'm no expert on it, but to me, I think about like the scale of harm. Like, how many black members were there prior to 1978? Like, how many people were being actively harmed by that? Secondly, temple worship, priesthood duties did not bar you from church activity. Like, so many people, so many non-Mormons don't really appreciate or understand the difference between our temple worship and our Sunday services. Like, at no point, well, actually, maybe Robert, I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't believe at any point we had segregated congregations.
No, we never did.
Yeah, we were always integrated in our Sunday worship.
Yep.
Who was the president, had a revelation to allow African-American men to hold the priesthood.
How about that? Okay. This brings us...
Oh, by the way, one thing that's unspoken here, but is really important, is like, as Protestants, they do not believe public revelation continues. They believe public revelation ceased with the death of the last apostle and ended around circa the 1st century with the inscripturation of the final book of the New Testament. So ipso facto, there can't be anything as public revelation. So keep that in mind. Maybe like sola scriptura does come up, but that's a pretty important like presuppositional difference between them and us as well.
Hey, Jacob, because we are going a little slow, we talked about this. Can we maybe move to like the 32-minute mark or so and get at some of the juicier parts of their gish gallop here? Because there's a couple of points, and I'd love to have Robert, because Robert, you have an article on your blog, Scriptural Mormonism, as a plug for you. Okay, 11 years, guys. And how many? 13,000 posts or something?
Thereabouts, yeah.
Thereabouts. That actually addresses this. That comes up closer to the 34-minute mark. But if we can, jump ahead and get into where he tries to talk about what we believe exaltation is. It's around 32 minutes.
Yeah, let me start it here, and then you let me know if you want me to jump ahead just a bit.
Which is probably the most difficult aspect of Mormonism, and that is we use the same words, but we have completely different dictionaries to define those words. When we say God, we mean the biblical God of the Old and New Testament, who is a spirit, who has always existed, who wasn't created, who didn't inherit the earth, all those things. We say Jesus, we mean certain things. When a Mormon says God, it's the same word, but it comes from a completely different background. So unpacking those things with a Mormon is what's absolutely necessary.
You know, it's funny. If we were to ask the most simple Christian out there and say to them, is someone a Christian who believes that God at any time was a sinful man? They would go, of course not.
Right.
You could never be a Christian. You could never think that and call yourself a Christian or believe God's word if you ever thought that God was not holy. I mean, holiness is at the root of who God is and what his being is. And this religion is saying, Well, we believe in holiness too. You just have to achieve it, like
That's correct.
like God the Father did. He achieved it,
Right.
and you can achieve it too if you. And it all comes, back to
Can,
that.
can I jump in a bit here already?
Yeah, let's do it.
First of all, yes, God is spirit. We all agree, but they claim like he's only spirit, and also what's read into that divine simplicity or absolute divine simplicity, where God doesn't actually have attributes that are different from one another. They're just analogical and so on and so forth. Try reading that into, like, say, the Asian or Eastern context or Second Temple Jewish context of the Old and New Testament. Can't find it. Also, like, if you believe in the hypostatic union and you accept Chalcedon, Christ today is the God-man. So you do believe it's possible to be a divine person who remains embodied, even if you believe in what's called the extra Calvinisticum, and still being and have no problem with the idea, like you say, he's true God and so forth. Especially like in Hebrews 1:3, where like the embodied Christ is a apogasma, passive reflection of the glory of God, and so on and so forth. Deuteronomy 32 says like how Yahweh inherits, or nachal, an inheritance. So God can actually inherit stuff, even if you don't believe it's a normative inheritance. And also, Christ, the person of Christ, was super exalted, and he benefited from the incarnation. Practically all Christologists agree with that, even if you're Trinitarian. Like the person of Christ became perfected. The person of Christ, not simply his impersonal human nature, grew in holiness, Luke 2:52. And also, we don't believe God was a sinner. This is Aaron Shevhovolov BS.
Right.
If you read the Kinfold Discourse, even if you believe in infinite regression, I don't, but that's a very early tradition that came after Joseph Smith. Whose mortality is Joseph Smith talking about and comparing it? He's comparing the Son's experience of mortality with that of the Father. We don't believe Christ sinned. We do believe he grew in holiness because, synergy and so forth. And the Father, we do believe, would have grown in holiness in a similar way through like obedience to commandments as a mortal who emptied himself. But that doesn't mean he sinned any more than we believe the same for Christ, who emptied himself, as Philippians 2 says. And yet he was like us in all respects, except he never commissioned sin. So no, we don't believe the Father ever was a sinner or any of that nonsense. Again, this is Aaron Schaff bilge. I'm trying to light so this is monetized.
Yeah. No, it's again, this goes back to the first thing he said when he opened up his show. I should have looked this up. Yeah, the argument that God was merely human who worked his way to become God later does not compute with LDS theology. It's our canonical scriptures, words that we actually consider to be scriptural, to be canonical, to be authoritative in any degree in the church, would reject that notion outright. Also, we don't believe God is created, and we don't believe Christ is created. We don't, because what's one of the more tenets of our faith? We don't believe in creation and nothing. And even if you hold, say, the traditional reading of the Kinfold Discourse, God always existed, and so has Christ. It's just like they would have assumed a spirit nature to their internal intelligence. But that's like an ex nihilo creation or like an Arian Christology, any more than, say, for a Trinitarian who would say that a divine person assuming human nature, a la the traditional understanding of the incarnation, was a creation as well. No, it's just assuming an extra nature or an extra something,
Well, and one thing I've noticed is how so many people like Kearns, and they like to characterize us as having this low view of God and this very high view, this arrogant view of mankind. When I think all of us would agree, when you understand what it is we are actually saying, what we actually believe, what's actually doctrine, I would say to them, you don't have a high enough view of either God or man.
That's
because
so. Oh well, I wanted to read this. This is I referred to the title page before once. I guess I'm going back to the well. An excerpt from the title page of the Book of Mormon, where it says, it's talking about the purpose of the Book of Mormon, which is to show unto the remnant of the house of Israel what great things the Lord hath done for their fathers, and that they may know the covenants of the Lord, and that they are not cast off forever, and also to the convincing of the Jew and Gentile that, here's the kicker, Jesus is the Christ, the eternal God. And if we're talking about how Christ is unified with God, and that when Christ says, I do nothing except that which the Father hath shown me, we know that Christ was sinless and perfect in this life, though he did grow from grace to grace. These are all things Protestants must accept or they deny sola scriptura. Then what is wrong with us when we declare Christ to be God eternal? Okay, we are not saying he was created and then became God, nor are we saying that the Father, God, our Heavenly Father, the Most High God, is what we, right, Sam? That's what we say in our ordinances. The Most High God was created and into a God in that sense. We say they were eternal. Now, if you want to argue about the meaning of eternal, and call it deep doctrine or whatever, I would suggest a psychological evaluation. But that's none of this is what we say. What we do say is that we too are eternal, and we agree with the Bible and your sola scriptura about some of the doctrine in there. Why does Revelation talk about us having crowns and sitting upon the throne of Christ? Why does Paul talk about having a crown waiting for him at the end of his writing? Why do they look forward to the time when they shall be joint heirs with Christ and share in all things? Why do the Catholics have the doctrine of communion with the divine where they share and abide in his love and unity as one? If there wasn't tradition in the Bible and in the teachings of the apostles for these things, and why does somehow sola scriptura end up kicking all that to the curb?
Just to build on what Sam said, because it's a really good point. And this was pointed out to me by Dave Burke, who's a Christadelphian. If you're a Trinitarian, typically you have a very high Christology, but a very low view of man, a very low anthropology. And Unitarians like himself say, for us, it's the other way around. You might have a low Christology. You don't believe Jesus is pre-existent and so forth, but you have a very high anthropology. For us, though, it's both. It's not either or, because we do have a very high anthropology, but that's the biblical witness, because we're made in the image and likeness of God. Even if you don't want to say that's three-dimensional, it's only moral merely. God is God and man share a same moral image with one another, and although that would be weakened as a result of the fall, it still persists after the fall. We're the very cult image of God. That's why there's no cult image of God that's allowable except for humanity in the Old Testament. If you're familiar with, say, the iconography and theology thereof of humanity and so forth. In Psalm 8, we're said to be a little lower than the angels. And also, if you're going to go Christological on this, Christ remains the God-man. Now, if you believe, say, humanity is a bunch of pond scum since the fall, that has no redeeming quality at all, yeah, but that's not the biblical witness of the nature of man, even after the fall. It's still something that's praised. To be human is something that's a really great privilege and something that is very highly exalted throughout the biblical witness, And what's the goal of the Christian? To rid ourselves of this wretched thing that's called humanity in this body? No, that's Gnostic. We'll be glorified and have resurrected bodies. Even as a Calvinist, who would say the redeemed will be glorified and have perfected, glorified bodies, as spoken about in Daniel and other texts as well. And again, if he accepts Chalcedon, Christ will remain the God-man forever as well. Pretty horrible, restrictive, demeaning nonsense if you believe humanity is ipso facto just awful and horrible.
Yeah, and with respect to humanity's relation to God and the divine potential of humanity, I was talking about this a little bit with Alan Hansen on our episode we did together a couple weeks ago, and we brought up a couple papers and things that were relevant to that discussion, but I'll bring it up here. There's some pretty strong discussion around Genesis 2. It's the second creation account in Genesis chapter 2:5 onwards, and specifically around the creation of humanity as being in the likeness and image of God, and the language that is being used in the biblical texts in the Hebrew and the Greek to for that matter, strongly suggests that as humanity was the method in which God created humanity and breathed into them the breath of life, the spirit, the breath of life, is similar to the way in which these cultures in the ancient Near East, Egypt, Mesopotamia, etc., would make icons and images and so forth, and perform
insert the
rituals.
cult presence of the god, the mishpeti or the mouth rituals.
Yeah. So this the one that I brought up was a book called The Image of God in the Garden of Eden, the creation of humanity in Genesis, in light of Mispi, Pitpi, and Whippiter in Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. It's by a scholar named Catherine McDowell. Thank you.
It's that's an excellent book.
So for anybody who wants to look that up, it's a pretty good book. I've got about halfway through it so far, but so humanity in an ancient Near Eastern context has always had a connection to the divine and a potential of divinity as well. We see that with the patriarchs. This is what Alan and I talked about for 2 hours a few weeks ago, is his paper on Abraham, the patriarchs, and the planets and so forth. And this idea that the patriarchs were seen as divine beings in the council, in the divine council, at different points in history and by numerous different groups in the ancient Near East. So this is not new. This is quite old. This is probably one of the oldest ideas we have in the biblical texts to begin with.
And I want to jump back in and hear more of how Kearns explains our view of God and exaltation and the history of God. But I just bring this up to say, I think there seems to be, and Robert mentioned it, a Gnostic view of things, that a hatred of embodiment of the physical world, that it's completely bad and we just need to get rid of it. So there's divine, it's spiritual, it's good. There's material, physical, that's bad. And look, I just think the more I learn about other broader theologies, the more I see there's such a robust insistence in LDS theology that the physical can be redeemed. And everything Kearns does to make God sound like, ew, gross. They had spiritual sex to give birth to Jesus and things like that. It's really demeaning. Again, it reflects a low anthropology, and he shoots himself in the foot by also implying that God is not empathetic to existential crisis, which is all of the human experience, that he truly is not connected to the human condition. And so I think
he's impassive.
Right. So I think
which makes no sense of Hebrews 2, which says like Christ experienced mortality so he can succor us and be our high priest, and because he knows what it is to experience mortality and even temptation.
So I think LDS theology is the most existential Christian theology out there.
Yeah. Well, and that seems to fall in line quite nicely with Alma 7 as well. All right. I think we're just now coming up, Michael, on some of that.
We'll see what we get. We'll see where we get.
Yeah.
Why Americans seem so attracted to Mormonism, because it is pull yourself up by your own bootstraps.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You take care of yourself. You buy that food from that company that can be stored in your basement for long periods of time. You buy gold.
All of which are based in Utah, by the way. When we lived there, I could have taken you to all of them.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And, you've got your gold plates. They got new ones that have President Trump on it. And you could store all that stuff up in your closet.
Okay, real quick. Does anybody know what he's talking about with gold plates that have Trump on them?
I asked you and Sam said he thinks that it's a misnomer, and he was talking about a company that must be printing gold coins or something. I saw Robert's reaction. I reacted that way when I heard that too, Robert. I was like, what? Is there someone? Because I know some Protestants actually put Trump on the Bible. How about that? But I've never heard of Trump being put on the Book of Mormon.
Yeah. No, if you watch Fox News with any regularity, you see those gold investment commercials, and they talk about these commemorative coins. I'm sure this guy must have just misspoke, but the slip is funny.
Yeah.
I will note that prepping is not a Utah phenomenon. There's loads of prepper companies and organizations throughout the US as well. So
Yeah. Okay.
It's because it's up to you. And if you're independent enough, if you work hard enough, if you love enough, then you might be worthy of this stuff that we see in the Bible.
Yeah, they actually argue that you place faith in Christ, you repent of your sins, you get baptized, and then there are 17 additional things that must be done in order to merit entrance into the highest level of heaven.
I want to note the 17 things are, which they don't describe, and we're running out of time.
Yeah, they won't say it.
They will not say. They just say 17 things and they move on. I don't understand that at all. I tried to think of all the different ways you could think to get to the number 17, and I didn't come up with any. So I don't know. Is that something you've ever heard, any of you three?
I know, like some say, like some would like a fasting, going to church, holding your callings, word of wisdom. But it seems like when it comes to like the number, it's like he's trying to argue and parallel this with the halakha, like the 613 rules, whatever it is. But like here's the thing. First of all, we don't believe you can legally merit God to give us anything. So there's a clarification about the term merit. There is such thing as gracious merit, but I really doubt he actually knows about that. And two, when it comes to say baptism, why are you baptized? According to the explicit teaching of the New Testament alone, you do it for the forgiveness of sins. You do it because baptism now saves you. It's an anti-type. It gives you a clear conscience. According to Paul in Romans 6, through the water baptism, you're buried with Christ in his death, and you're glorified and given new life, and you're justified, verse 7. And a host of other considerations. Baptism regenerates. That's the explicit New Testament witness. And that's just the New Testament alone. So for a Protestant, any work you do cannot avail yourself with respect to justification. But funny enough, even as a Calvinist, he would argue once you're regenerated, your works can actually help when it comes to, say, processional sanctification. Because for them, sanctification is one positional where you're labeled holy or sanctified. But there's also a processional aspect as well that's not perfected until life to come. It's something that ebbs and flows, But no one would say, like, you legally merit any increase to holiness or sanctification. It's something that's synergistically done, even in Reformed anthropology and theology.
Yeah, this is Protestant. Try not to advocate for cheap grace challenge level impossible. Without
being internally inconsistent. Yeah,
that you contribute to your walk with God.
Yeah,
and that's part of the sanctification.
Yeah. It's like the challenge. Can you actually critique another faith without shooting yourself in the foot?
Yeah, and even to put a finer point on meriting God's grace in that regard, the Book of Mormon makes explicitly clear in King Benjamin's address that there is nothing we can do to merit God's blessings, God's grace. He offers it to us. We receive it under the conditions in which it's offered. And then any good that we do with that grace he gives us is then returned to us tenfold, 100-fold, whatever. We are continually in God's debt. There is nothing we could ever do to merit his grace.
Yeah, we can't legally merit it, but there's like gracious merit, like a father rewarding his son super abundantly. If I may, if I could quote something from 1950, so before the church tried to become mainstream here, this is from Nephi Jensen, The World's Great History, 1950. Man does need divine assistance in achieving salvation. It is a central truth of the Christian philosophy of salvation. On one occasion, Jesus said, "If the Son of Man be lifted up from the earth, he will draw all men unto him," and that's John 12. The power by which we are drawn unto God, or unto his purity and righteousness, or as Paul says, created unto good works, Ephesians 2:10, or as Moroni says, enticed to good, is of grace or inspired of God. But this grace-given power will not avail in our salvation unless we utilize it in strict obedience to the laws and ordinances of the gospel and righteous living to the end of our lives. So God gives us this. We all have the free will ability to accept or reject the gospel, but we cooperate synergistically with God. But it's not a case say we legally merit with God. We're actually his co-workers, in the gospel and so on and so forth. Or as Paul says in Galatians 5:6, acts of love or acts of charity, not acts of the law of Moses. actually perfects faith. And that's not a sola fide. That's why like so many Protestants are aghast at trying to translate that as a passive, and they try to argue the verb there is a middle, but it's not. All other instances in the Greek New Testament and the literature of the time in Christian literature is a passive. Good, these works perfect faith, but they're not works of legal merit. They're works that we do out of love. And this kind of goes back to another essential difference between us and most Protestants. We don't believe grace is simply God's favor. We don't believe justification is simply a legal fiction where God just labels you righteous or just. You know, that's basically nominalism. That's why never really Protestant theology is anachronistic. You need nominalism to make sense of it. No, it's something that God does internally within us, and we cooperate with God. And grace is ontic. It's a power. It's basically the energy of God as well. So there's a host of like other presuppositions that he's not discussing, maybe because he's absolutely ignorant of them. But it's really core, like when Latter-day Saints interact with Protestants, especially Calvinists, to be familiar with these differences.
So, like, one of my favorite things, though, also in this kind of discussion, what is Isaiah talking about with there being multiple saviors in Mount Zion working in the vineyard with those righteous trees? And why are they getting rewarded the way they are? This is from Isaiah 61 to 65. If you read those, what would a Protestant say to that? That's somewhat rhetorical, but you can't answer in a second, Robert. But the other thing is, Christ talks about wanting to walk with us. There's so many, you know, some people like the teddy bear Jesus love these images, and these are true images. They're just autocomplete, but like that he's walking beside you, that he's there with you. It's true. He wants us to yoke ourselves to him, though, and that yoke is that bond of love that you were talking about, where we will do as he did or would do. What would Jesus do? That's their thing, right? And what is wrong with adhering to that? It's such a weird thing because they'd be like, well, no. Obviously doing good is good. Like we want to do good, but you guys think it saves you. I don't think that saves me. I think grace saves me, but I think Christ expects me to be yoked to him and walk the same path with him. Because if I'm in the same yoke as him, he's leading and pulling me along, but I got to do my part. You can't have, even in a team of 8 oxen, one ox not do their job. You got to cut them loose. Anyway, do you know if there's an answer to the end of Isaiah?
It would kind of depend on the process when it comes to, say, works, when it comes to, say, the judgment bar. Some would say, like, it's only about the super believer, but that's more like the antinomian answer. Some others would say, like, it's only rewards or, like, different degrees of reward in the hereafter and what have you.
Oh, different crowns or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, like, we could spend a lot of time on this. I'm just going to throw out, like, one other thing would be, it's the clear witness also of the New Testament, not just a baptism or regeneration, but like a true believer, not a facile believer or a fake believer, but a true believer can actually lose their justification. Like in Hebrews 10, 26 to 29, it speaks of like, say, someone who Christ died for, you know, but they engaged in apostasy. That would have been like a death penalty offense in the law of Moses. But even worse now, they're spiritually cut off. And it's as if Christ cannot actually shed his blood for them anymore. And again, he did shed his blood for them previously, and refers to them as sanctified. And how the sanctified person has lost their salvation. In the order of salvation for a Calvinist especially, you're justified first, then you're sanctified. You know, in the order of salvation, even if you think it's logical, it's justified and sanctified. So this person is a justified believer. Christ died for them, and they're actually an apostate who's lost their salvation, and they're doomed. They're spiritual damnation. So again, it's a clear witness of Scripture. Even a true believer can lose their salvation.
Yeah, King David, right? Which might be more of an LDS thing, but I don't know why you wouldn't draw that out of the Bible. But yeah.
All right. Let's play through the video and just let it go for a few minutes, and then we could talk about it, because I got maybe like, I'm gonna give it another like 15 minutes or so, and then I gotta bounce. So let's play through the next few minutes and see how much we can get through.
Gain your own planet.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, think about this. If you were to ask any basic Christian out there, you know, just the most simple Christian you could find, and say, what was the worst sin? What was the main sin that kicked Satan out of heaven? I mean, most would know that Satan wanted to be God. And wanting to be God is like that's heresy. And in Mormonism, that's the key to the whole religion, is that you do want to be God, not just want to be like God.
You become equal to him.
You become equal to God.
Yep.
And you might even be a better God on planet Xenu that you get later on than this God has been on Earth.
Right.
I mean, he may have reached some level of holiness, but maybe you're going to reach a better level. Maybe you in planet Xenu you don't allow any evil.
And interesting, there was a debate early in Mormonism between Brigham Young and Orson Pratt, who was one of the original 12 apostles with Brigham Young, over this idea of the doctrine of God. Brigham Young argued that God could continue to progress and get more holy, more merciful, more graceful, gain knowledge, things like that. Orson Pratt argued, no, he is everything all at the same time. He can't progress in anything, or he's not God. Orson Pratt was basically arguing for what we would call, more or less, an orthodox understanding of God's attributes. Brigham Young threatened to excommunicate him.
Wow.
And then sent him off on a mission to England to get him away for a while. When he brought him back, Orson Pratt had, quote, come to his senses and agreed with Young for the rest of his life.
Yeah, when the money faucet stops.
This is torture, Jacob. I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
Money faucet. Anyway, go on, Robert. Yours.
Okay, if Kearns sees this, you're an intellectual fraud. There is no nice way of saying this. First of all, Planet Xenu, F you, dude. That's like guilt by association with Scientology and all that. Two, we don't believe you will ever become as glorified as God the Father, let him a better God in him. The teachings of the church is like, we will always be subservient of him. Read a book. I'm sorry. Let's see. Where did Brigham actually try to excommunicate Orson? They didn't debate that, and they also debated Adam God, but where's the threat of excommunication? And, you know, this is something I've studied a lot. Look at the B.H. Roberts project on Adam God and related topics. Again,
One
nonsense.
second. I'm going to excommunicate you or send you to baptize 3,000 people and bring them back to Utah. Weird. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. Also, like, no, Satan, the lie of Satan is not that you. By the way, God actually vindicates what Satan says. Like, the humans have become like one of us, you know, knowing good and evil. The lie, why Satan fell, if you think like it's about Isaiah 14 in its original context, it's not. Same for Ezekiel 28. But it's to be independent of God. We believe God will form us into deities through his grace and our participation with him. To try to like claim we believe in Satan's lying in Genesis 3 is one, a misrepresentation of our theology, and two, just a really crappy reading of Genesis 3 and the context where God says, yeah, the humans have become like one of us, knowing good and evil, you know. And getting your own planet, we will become co-creators. Or as my friend Stephen Smoot said, like, one lousy planet better be a universe. But we will be co-creators with God, but we'll never be independent of him. You know, there's a lot more that you could say. One could say. Let me just read what By K. Packer said, and this is from the Ensign, November 1984. The Father is the one true God. This thing is certain. No one will ever ascend above him. No one will ever replace him. Nor will anything ever change the relationship that we, his literal offspring, have with him. He is Elohim, the Father, he is God. Of him there is only one. We revere our Father and our God. We worship him. So no matter how glorified we will be and so forth, it's one because of him. To any glory we'll receive, as he's telos, it will be to him. And that's the same when it comes to the worship of Jesus. Any worship or glory given to Christ will go ultimately back to the Father. That's Philippians 2:6-11. And we'll never be an independent God. I mean, both this guy and also the host are, I know I'm Irish, so I'll try to be polite my language. Hacks. There's a more Irish term I could use, but you want this monetized, Jacob, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's, again, everyone who may or may not be familiar with these types of arguments and explanations, misrepresentations and lies of what it is we believe, can you see how when they caricaturize our beliefs, our high anthropology, our high theology, they're actually painting themselves into a corner like, oh, I would never even want to desire to be like God. That they're forcing themselves into this, you know, creator, creature, uncreated, created, just totally other distinction between themselves and God, when it is Jesus Christ who is inviting them into who he is. And so they have to effectively deny that in order to say, oh, the Mormons, they're weird for believing in what Jesus said.
Yeah. So because Robert brought it up, and it's implied in their statements or their comments, a lot of people bring up Isaiah 14 as a sort of, you know, I don't know what you would call it, but as a
Proof text, maybe?
proof text,
Yeah.
I guess. So in its context, this is talking. The verses are talking about how the king of Babylon wants to ascend to the heights and sit on the throne of God. One thing I find interesting, I'll point out, and this is totally tangential to our conversation here, but I find it interesting nonetheless. So you all get to hear it anyway. The verses, and I don't have them pulled up off the top of my head, but when he talks about ascending to the heights and taking his place on the throne of God or whatever, this is the king of Babylon. That's as far as we understand its original context, who is speaking here, and he will ascend to the heights of Zaphon, which is the mountain temple and dwelling place of Baal, the god of Babylon. And so what's interesting too, I'll mention, is because this is a temple setting, the throne is in the temple of Zaphon. The psalmists in a couple of different psalms actually report that Yahweh ascends to the heights and takes over the Mount of Zaphon and makes it his dwelling place, Mount Zion. And so there's a couple of cool things there I'm actually going to talk about, because I'm going to be dropping my video on temples as mountains motif here in the next week or two. And that is one point that I make in it. And so I'm giving a little bit here, but yeah, go ahead, Robert. Oh, I think you might be muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Yeah. With respect to Isaiah 14, Michael Heiser had an article about 2001 in Vetus Testamentum on the background of Isaiah 14. He argues that the bisexual Canaanite god Attar is in view as the king of Babylon here. And if you're familiar with the narrative in the Ugaritica, Attar tries to dethrone Baal, as you know, like Zaphon in the context, and he can't fit on the throne and so forth. We don't believe, like, say, this kind of fickle idea, like, say, we'll dethrone God, like Attar did to Baal, or we'll do to Yahweh, or what have you. We don't believe, like, we'll be usurping God, or taking his place, or trying to be his equal. So even if you want to, like, say, take the Canaanite context or Babylonian context with Murdoch to Isaiah 14, and try to, like, transpose in, like, say, a Christianized context, it still doesn't match. We don't believe we'll be dethroning God, or that we want to be God out of vanity, or take prerogatives that are not ours. We'll be gifted the ability. We're not going to be grasping at it and trying to steal it like booty. It's like, again, Philippians 2:6-11, like, say, why is Christ exemplified? Like, he did not try to, like, snatch deity as a type of booty. We won't be doing the same thing as well. It'll be something that will be gifted to us, as a gift. It's not something like, say, we'll steal from God or try to take his place, and lock him up, or send the Sheol that happened to Baal after his defeat against Yom, or against Mot, I should say.
Mot. And when we look at, like, Revelation 3, for example, what are Protestants to make of verses that explicitly state that the followers of Christ who endure are given a throne and a crown and sit with Christ on his throne?
Yeah, and you probably know, like, the Second Temple context, like, to sit on the throne of God is not simply, like, say, have judicial abilities only.
Right.
Sitting on the throne of God is like you're a divine person. That's why there's an entire motif in the pseudepigraph, like, divinized patriarchal figures like Job and others sitting on a divine throne, singular, of God. So we'll actually participate in the Father's divinity just as Christ participates in his Father's divinity through his grace. And also, like in verse 9, glorified Christians receive proskuneo, or worship. And if you look at how that verb is used, it's not something for, like, it's not simply like reverential bowing down or courtesy. Every other instance in the book of Revelation, it's used in a liturgical cultic context as well.
Yeah. And this reminds me to, I'll plug this again for those who maybe didn't hear it earlier in the stream. I did a 2-part episode with Alan Hansen a couple weeks ago on his paper that he co-wrote with Spencer Krause that they presented on at the conference in the Interpreter Foundation a few months ago. There we go. Robert's got him.
And the books have come out, yeah.
And the books are out now, so you can go purchase them on Amazon. In that discussion and in their paper, they expressly discuss how the patriarchs were at different points in history in the ancient Near East and by different groups referred to as divine beings, as members of the divine council. Jacob himself is called the demiurge, the co-creator of God, or the instrumental agent through which God created the universe and the cosmos, so forth. So these patriarchal figures and prophets and others throughout the pseudepigrapha, as Robert already mentioned, are given divine status in a number of places throughout history. This is not really up for debate at this point.
And like the angel Yael, he's called like another Yahweh. He's given like, and also like the angel of the Lord in Exodus. The Masoretes understood the Hebrew to say like the divine name was in him, which was the justification for how he could forgive sins and retain sins as well, which were usually divine prerogatives.
And this plays into a couple of things are related to Abraham, who's, you know, the great patriarch, right? Christ refers to Lazarus in the parable of Lazarus being in Abraham's bosom. Why would he be in Abraham's bosom if he's in heaven? What is it about Abraham's bosom that is supposed to be where you want to be, right? It implies Abraham is divine. The other thing, and I learned this studying the Passover in greater depth than I ever have this last year. And this isn't, I don't know how widespread this is, but this Jewish man that I was learning about the Passover from said that the way you can look at Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob or Israel is as, and so he's, you know, he's a Protestant now or whatever, but is the three divine beings of the Godhead and how they lead Israel, you know, or their children by adoption or whatever. I thought that was a fascinating look at it. Again, you know, he's now a Protestant, and so he's kind of drawing that parallel. But he said when he was a child and he asked why the three pieces of bread were in the packet, that was one of the answers. Oh, it represents Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. And so then as he grows up, he's like, oh, it's kind of like the Godhead and being them, but they, as the patriarchs, are considered divine. And so there's parallels to draw from these Old Testament stories, you know, in their figurative types and archetypes and stuff that I think are really beautiful. And I don't think it's a stretch to say, and how the ancient people thought about these things, as you guys are talking about, with the divinity of those who are given the commission by God, right? And they're talked about as having walked with God, talked with God as a friend face to face and all that stuff. To them, that this is implying that they're divine. They're able to endure the divine presence.
Yeah. With respect to the angel of the Lord and also the Son of Man figures in the Hebrew Bible, they have explicit references to these figures as given authority over judgment, authority over the earth, the cosmos, etc. In Exodus, the angel of the Lord has authority to judge and to remit sin, or to hedge up the way for the Israelites. If you recall in the New Testament Gospels, it's not only the Savior himself who refers to himself as the Son of Man and as one having authority. It's also his apostles who he delegated authority to remit sin.
John 20:23.
Yeah. So if we were to take this to more closer to home, so to speak, to individuals who we know were followers of Christ, even from a Protestant worldview, when you don't believe that the apostles themselves are divine figures, they're still given that authority by Christ.
But Protestants tend to like water it down. It's like John 20:23 when it says like whosoever sins you remit and so forth. It's like, well, that's just about like preaching the gospel and telling them about the forgiveness they received beforehand. But it's like it doesn't.
That's really watery though, yeah. And you would have to square that with the sealing power in Matthew 16 and so forth.
It's a knee-jerk reaction to say sacerdotalism and other aspects of Roman Catholic theology. It's not based on good exegesis.
Yeah. Well, Jacob, I know you got to get going, but I think Well, I'd be remiss to not say at the end, at the conclusion of this stream, that yeah, we were able to get some of the juicy bits out of this podcast reaction.
Yeah, we're
But
just a little bit over halfway through the video too.
there's more. There's more. We could do a follow-up on just this.
Yeah, you guys want to
But
do a follow-up and finish it?
Yeah.
I'd be happy to.
And by the way,
then-
like, feel free to like always invite me to like stuff like this if you ever want to. A lot of my evenings
awesome.
these days are free. So
Awesome.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
But I would just say, in conclusion, like, yeah, it's helpful for us to have these conversations where we can speak with precision and correct inaccuracies and lies about what we believe and the history of the church and all that. But I think it's also important for us to just remind everybody, yeah, we're dunking on this guy a little bit, and it's pretty embarrassing that he's spent his whole career to be so miseducated on the thing that he makes a living doing. But go listen to the hymn "I Believe in Christ." You know, let's remind ourselves of the reverence and the humility of our testimonies and our relationship to Christ. What just popped into my head, go watch or read this one again, Elder Maxwell's last address at General Conference. Remember how merciful the Lord hath been. Like, that's just a masterful talk. And let's just remember that we are all on this journey together, and it's fun to do these streams, but also, just like these Protestant guys would say, like, in contrast to what they estimate our arrogant high anthropology would be, they're like, oh, I just am in awe of God's grace. We are too. Like, we can be that too, and believe the Lord's promises. So let's do both.
Yeah. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. I do want to, real quick, before we go, give Robert an opportunity to plug anything he's got going on in his channel in the near future.
Tomorrow I have an episode with Jerry Grover on his proposal for Sumerian names of Jaredite names and words. So that's going to be like very niche and very interesting. Matthew Bowen on the 21st on Book of Mormon Christology and Mariology. Terrell Givens, who I don't think anyone's ever heard of, the 30th on his forthcoming book. And I have one of the authors of a recent book, peer-reviewed article on memory studies on 9/11 and the First Vision, who will be coming on soon to discuss her work. It's a very good supplement to Stephen Harper's work on the topic as well. So that's what's coming in terms of my podcast episodes.
Awesome. Sam, I know you're working on a presentation as well, so we'll see that maybe in the next month or so. Is that kind of the plan?
Yeah, in a few weeks I'll be coming on Robert, and he'll basically be playing referee for some original work I've been doing, all about the centuries-long debate about how God can have foreknowledge and you still have moral responsibility for your choices. And
so I think I think that's going to be turned into a bit of a debate between my being the open theist and Sam's proposal as well. But I'll be nice to you, Sam.
Well, no, I say, hey, we'll see, because I am not a compatibilist, so we'll have fun.
Yeah, I having read a little bit about Sam's proposal here, some of the stuff he's been working on, he's shared with us a little bit. I think it'll be much more compatible with open theism than you might otherwise think. But yeah,
well,
it should be
I'm still
interesting.
looking forward to it. So yeah.
Just trying
I think that's going to be the first. That's going to be the first Saturday of September, I believe. So.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, trying to start from LDS presuppositions, because it turns out everyone's a classical theist when it comes to this conversation.
Yeah. Also, last thing I'll plug here for this channel. Look ahead to the next week or two, when I drop my second video in my Why Temples Matter series. This particular video, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be all about the temple as a mountain motif throughout the ancient Near East. Also, Michael and I mentioned this up at the top of the discussion earlier. Michael and I are going to be co-hosting a new show starting next Thursday evening, August 14th, called Extra Biblical. And it's going to be a show dedicated to reading, discussing, and having a whole lot of fun talking about extra biblical documents, the apocryphal texts, pseudepigrapha, early church writers, and some of their contributions. A number of different texts that are not considered canonical. We're going to have a blast to just talking about all sorts of cool things, from the very awesome, deep, and inspirational to the really weird and everything in between. You're going to see it all. And we are going to start. Michael has chosen our first text. So he will have that ready. He's just going to take it right now. I'm just kidding. Yeah, we're going to be co-hosting that together this Thursday, August 14th. And look for my community post with that, the information of that. And with that, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Let's do this again. We'll finish up part 2, and maybe Sam, because you've got the giant list of videos to respond to and react to. Maybe we'll get another shorter one in there as well, and we can have another really fun live stream.
Oh yeah, the list continues to grow. The spice must flow.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much, and thanks to all the people in the chat. You guys are awesome as well, and have a great Saturday. All right.